This is the 2019 paper, AS paper now, and we're looking at pure unit 1 and question 1. So the question we have is that we've got trig identities that we're focusing on. And the main focus is, it says the values between 0 and 360. So that's another thing that we need to focus on to make sure that we have the values correct. And basically, we've got tan and cos at the moment, which we can't work with. So we have to do something and manipulate that. So the first thing is the trig identity that you need to have known, which is tan theta is equal to sine theta over cos theta. And what we're going to do is be substituting that into the formula. So now we're going to have 3 sine theta over cos theta plus 2 cos theta, and that equals 0. At this stage now, we're trying to look at some connections that we can get rid of. So I don't want a fraction, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply by cos theta. And some people say, but I'm not eliminated sine or cos at this point, but you'll see what happens. So now I've got 3 sine theta plus 2 cos squared theta, that equals 0. And now we can implement the other rule that you might remembered. So it's sine squared theta plus cos sine squared theta equals 1. So we're going to rearrange that and sub that in. So 1 minus cos, not cos at this point now. 1 minus sine squared theta. Okay. When we expand out of that, we're going to have a minus sine squared theta. So what I'm going to just do now is expand out and check it all over the other side so that we have positives and not negatives. So that's what I'm just doing. If you're wondering, whoa, she's jumped a step. I'm just checking everything over to the other side. Hence why my signs are all changing. Minus 2. There we go. This point now we can factorize. So we got the factors of 2 and 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. So we're going to have 4 and 1. And we can use the simple factorize rule if you wanted to. So if I just write that by here. So I've got 2s squared, and I'm going to be doing minus 4s plus an s minus 2. I'm just factorizing that. So that's giving me 2s s minus 2 and 1 s minus 2. So we go. If you are struggling on that, please leave a comment on how to do that, and I can do a whole video on just factorizing with a coefficient in front of your x squared or your sine squared or whatever, because it is a tricky skill to do. I tend to use the method where I split it up and I just multiply basically the first and last number to get there. But obviously, if you want someone just to go through that with you, that's fine. I can do that. There you go. And that equals 0. Once we're at this point, it's really lovely. Okay, so we've got 2 options now. So we know that sine theta is either minus 1/2 or it's 2. Now, if we think about our sine graph, we have limitations of 1 and minus 1. So straight away, we can say sine theta cannot be 2 as the graph is limited, or limits, has limits. Bad, awful. Has limits between 1 and minus 1. Obviously, if it's a 2 sine theta and that, then it would have changed. But in this case, it's between 1 and minus 1. Now, the other one we got is the minus half. So I used a cast diagram, hoping you would have seen a cast diagram by now. So cast diagram is quite simple. So you write the words cast starting from the bottom. Now, because we're working with a negative, we're going to do the opposite to what we'd normally do. Basically, in all, that's all positive values, and S would be when sine is positive, T would be when tan is positive, and C would be when cos is positive. Because we're going the opposite effect, we're going when they're negative, so we're going to be going the opposite side. Now, if you put sine 30 into sine half into your calculator, you will get 30. And because we've already done the negatives, we don't need to worry about then typing that bit in. So if you think this starts at 0, 90, 180, 270, da, da, da. When sine to the minus 1 is minus a half, our values are going to be 180 plus 30, I don't know, so 210. And we're also going to have 330, and that's it. And that just explains it all. So I use the cast diagram to obviously explain it and just show the way I'm going. And it also means I'm not missing any values out. Because I couldn't do anything with the 2, it's just straight away, there's no values on the graph for that. The other things that I would make sure that you're doing when you're checking these questions is just basically making sure that when you get to the point where you're factorizing, you haven't got mixed signs and causes, because that means you've missed a step, that you've checked your identities, so you've done 1 minus if it's slipping in, and obviously making sure your sine and cos are the right way around. And the other thing is, a simple thing to check is that your calculator is in degrees. There will be times in your exams where you'll be changing it to basically radian, so it's just making sure it's in degrees before you start this question, unless the question is asking you to work in radians. Okay, answers. So the first step, we got 1 mark, and that was just using tan theta is over sine theta and cos theta. So we're literally subbing that in, which we've shown by here. So that gave us our first mark. Our next mark was using our sine squared theta plus cos squared theta equals 1, which is what we've shown by here. Okay, so that was our second mark. Our third mark then was for factorizing in. So we factorized into our brackets by here. So that gave us our third mark. Our fourth mark then was noticing that there was no solution for sine theta equals 2. So that's what we've set by here. And sine theta minus a half gave us, well, that was basically our part of our A1 as well. And our last 2 marks were for our different values. So we got 1 mark each for those. So just using that cast diagram is very important there. Hopefully that helps, and hopefully that's just a few breakdown of where you could go with this question. There's loads of different scenarios, but actually it isn't too bad once you get your teeth into it. There you go.